Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Scotland Yard and the Crown Prosecution Service are facing sharp criticism tonight following an announcement that 9 newspaper journalists accused over illegal payments to public officials have had the charges against them dropped. The cases came from Operation Elveden, a multi-million-pound investigation prompted by the phone hacking affair. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford has more details.
There were cheers, tears and raw joy at the Old Bailey this afternoon as more newspaper journalists were found not guilty, as many others have been before.
Unbelievable 3 years. I did not expect when I went to do shifts at the Sun I'd end up at the Old Bailey on 3 counts of an indictable offence. It's unbelievable. Standing in the dock there, my heart was just pounding and pounding. I just can't believe it.
The Sun's royal editor, Duncan Larkham, cleared in a previous trial, pursued the detectives down the street.
How do you feel about 3 years of your life wasted harassing journalists?
We've convicted an awful lot of public officials, haven't we?
Well done, well done.
29 journalists were originally charged for buying scoops like Bulger killer gets a personal trainer from a prison officer and John Terry's mum arrested for shoplifting from a police officer. The News of the World even paid an officer for an internal phone directory for the royal household. But the Director of Public Prosecutions has now told the BBC she's abandoned prosecutions against all except 3 of the 29 journalists.
Is this an admission then that for 3 years the Crown Prosecution Service has been getting these decisions wrong?
No, it's not. It's about the law evolving and us about reacting to the law. When you look at how this came about, was the Elveden inquiry which highlighted all of these issues and a very thorough and lengthy police investigation which then referred the cases to us to look at.
It was the sheer scale of the payments by newspapers like The Sun, The Mirror and the News of the World that led to these prosecutions. The concern was that some of Britain's vital institutions were being undermined by Fleet Street moles working deep inside them, selling stories for cash. Under new rules, journalists who pay police officers could still be prosecuted. But in general, those who pay prison officers and other civil servants will not, though the public officials who take the money will still be put on trial. The Sun's former managing editor, Graham Dudman, was one of those who heard today he wouldn't be facing a retrial.
Was that really a sensible use of vast sums of money? Tens of millions of pounds of public money have been spent on chasing journalists, on pursuing journalists whose crime was what? Was publishing stories. All these stories were true.
This evening, many of the journalists involved adjourned to the pub to watch their own story unfold on TV. Still angry and worried for those who still face trial, but also immensely relieved.
Well, Daniel's with me now. And Daniel, what's the significance of the CPS dropping these charges?
Well, it's very significant. After the Elveden inquiry into newspaper practices, a decision was made by the police and prosecutors to go after journalists who are paying public officials like prison officers, police officers and civil servants for stories. And they did that and spent a lot of money doing that. But the trouble is that juries kept deciding that these journalists were not guilty. And then the Lord Chief Justice intervened last month and said that the prosecutors really need to show that there was real damage to the public interest being caused by these stories being published. And those two things together have forced the Director of Public Prosecutions to relook at all these cases and come to the conclusion that it's really only in the case of police officers being paid that journalists maybe should be prosecuted. But when it comes to all the other public officials being paid, then it's much less likely that's going to happen. Though it's worth reiterating that, of course, the public officials do still face prosecution.
OK. Daniel, many thanks. There was positive news on jobs and pay today. Unemployment has fallen to its lowest level since the financial crash 7 years ago.